The jiggly jaggly Japanese cheesecake. It is so delicious, so delicate, yet it is so easy to fail when making it at home. Today, I'm gonna break down 3 scenarios of failing to make a Japanese cheesecake, the reason for causing the issues, and how to prevent them. Since I'm not a professional baker, everything that I say will be based on my own research and personal experience. Here are the 3 common failing scenarios when making a Japanese cheesecake. 1. To have a pudding-like layer at the bottom, a cracked top, and a sunken cake. Let's start with the first scenario, which somehow happens to me the most. To make sure everyone's on the same page, I want to quickly go over some important steps of making a Japanese cheesecake. First, you'll need to melt the cream cheese and butter with milk through the double boiling method. Once it's warm and not too hot, you'll add the egg yolks, some flour, and depends on your recipe, you may need to add some baking powder or other starches. And that's the first component of your cheesecake. The second component will be the meringue, which is made up of egg white and sugar. You'll beat the egg whites until it's foamy, then you'll start gradually adding sugar and keep beating until you have a stiff peak. Then, you'll gently fold the meringue into the cream cheese mixture. Now, coming back to the main topic, the main reason for causing the pudding-like layer is that some part of the mixture has no air bubbles. When you're mixing the meringue into the cream cheese mixture, you're incorporating all the air bubbles from the meringue into the cream cheese mixture. When there's no air bubbles, the batter will sink down to the bottom and cause the pudding layer. It could either because the mixture is not well mixed, or some air bubbles collapse during the mixing process. Here are a few things to do to prevent the air bubbles from collapsing. You want to make sure a thorough mixing of the cream cheese mixture and the meringue, but make sure to use a spatula and be extra gentle to make sure that the bubbles were not broken. And you also want to make sure that the cream cheese mixture is close to the room temperature when adding the meringue. If you add the meringue when the cream cheese mixture is too hot, the air bubbles will collapse. And from my personal experience, using the double boiling method to melt the cream cheese and butter is better than using the microwave. Now, let's move on to scenario 2, which is to have a cracked cake. When your cake is cracked, it is most likely that the surface of your cake is too dry. It is important to have your cake in a water bath when baking. When your water bath is dry up at the end of the baking, then it would be an easy fix, just simply add more water. Or the oven temperature is probably too high. If the temperature is too high, the surface of the cake will be already cooked while the cake is still rising, which will eventually crack the surface. If the temperature is too low, you wouldn't have a nice brown color on the surface. The right way to do is to have 2 baking temperature. For my own recipe, I bake it at 310 Fahrenheit for 45 minutes. During this process, I want to make sure that the inside of the cake is fully cooked. And after that, I increase the temperature to 350 and bake it for another 50 minutes. That is when I give it a nice brown color on the surface. And finally, we're at the third scenario, which is a sunken cake. So this is pretty straightforward, and it could be applied to all other cake as well. If you have a cake that is sunken in the middle, normally it's because the middle of the cake is not cooked enough, which would be too soft to hold the structure. You could either increase the baking temperature or bake it longer to make sure that the cake is cooked through. Another common mistake is to open the oven door during the baking process to check on the cake. For a delicate cake like the Japanese cheesecake, you don't want to have a sudden temperature change or it will lose the steam and affect the structure of the cake. Even when it's done baking, I would suggest to just slightly open the oven door and let the cake slowly cool down inside the oven. And that's everything for today. And thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.